It was Thursday, maybe 5:45 p.m., deep in the guts of the city's subway system. I was on the red line, jammed up against the far door, trying to balance my laptop bag and maintain my fragile mental barrier against the 1,000 other exhausted commuters pressed around me. The air in that car always smells like old pennies and stale, reheated coffee. That was my normal. That was my life. I was reading some stupid article on my phone. Something about artisanal pickles. When the train stalled. Not at a station, but dead center in the tunnel, maybe 50 yards from the fluorescent flicker of the next stop. The lights went out for a second, then snapped back on, humming that low, familiar, trapped in a tin can drone. People groaned, checked their watches. Nobody panicked. This was routine. But then came the smell. Started faint, near the middle of the car. Coppery, like someone spilled a bucket of pennies, but thicker, richer. A warm, iron smell that immediately cut through the usual stale subway atmosphere. I heard the first noise. Not a scream that came later. This was a muffled sound of struggle, a frantic shifting of weight, followed by this awful, wet, tearing noise. It was like ripping a sodden sheet, only slower, and punctuated by a strained, guttural gargle that was definitely not human. Then the shouts started. Near the middle of the car. "Hey, what the hell? Get off her." A brief, terrifying hush fell over the rest of the car. The kind where everyone collectively holds their breath, hoping it's just a drunk or a domestic spat. The space in the middle, around the support poles, was suddenly thrashing. I leaned forward, trying to see over the shoulders of a tall guy in a tweed jacket. What I saw still gives me night terrors. It was Suit Man. A corporate type I saw every day. Same briefcase, same perfectly knotted blue tie. Suit Man was on his hands and knees, but he wasn't praying. He was violently attached to the neck of a woman who had been standing next to him. Her perfectly tailored suit jacket was instantly soaked a rich, dark burgundy. But the worst part was Suit Man's face. It was chalk white, veins bulging, and his jaw was moving with a frantic, animalistic hunger that was impossible. His eyes were milky white, completely blind, yet focused entirely on the consumption. He was thrashing, but only from the waist up, his legs completely dead weight. The screaming started then. Pure, hysterical, beautiful chaos. "Oh God, he's biting her. Get off." The tweed jacket guy tried to pull Suit Man off, grabbing him by the shoulders. Bad move. Suit Man spun with unnatural speed, sinking his teeth deep into the Tweed Man's forearm, tearing a chunk of fabric and flesh. Tweed Man didn't even scream. He just slumped, his face going blank, milky white settling over his pupils. 2 bites. 2 seconds. 2 infected. The conversion was instantaneous, terrifyingly fast. Tweed Man's legs went stiff and he started to rise, his head cocked at an impossible angle, making that same wet, gurgling sound. The door I was pressed against was now the only way out, and it was a mile away from the actual platform. The rest of the car, maybe 40 people, erupted into a compressed, panicked mob. Bodies surged toward the front and back doors, but the carriage was too full. "Emergency stop! Pull the lever!" Someone screamed. The lever was behind me. I shoved my bag over my head and lunged, clawing my way through the panicked crowd. Elbows flying, breath ragged. I finally reached the red glass case and slammed my fist through the plastic cover, pulling the handle down with all my might. The train jolted violently, sparks showering outside the window. We hadn't stopped, but we had slowed. The lights flickered again, dancing over the growing wave of chalk-white faces and frantically snapping jaws. The smell was unbearable now. Iron and infection. Just then, the train lurched forward, making its final approach, scraping against the side of the tunnel. It was going too fast for a clean stop as we rocketed toward the platform light. I saw Suit Man and Tweed Man lunge, their arms outstretched, their fingers grasping, and I saw the woman I'd been pressed against, her cheek already bruised, her mouth agape, making that same terrible, wet noise. She had joined them. The train hit the station barrier with a deafening crunch. The doors hissed open, spitting me and the remaining terrified commuters out onto the platform in a mad, desperate scramble. I didn't stop running until I reached the top of the stairs. I paused, looking back down into the pit of the subway station. The train was mangled. The power was out in the tunnels. And below, under the emergency lights of the platform, a growing horde of the undead, moving with a jerky, impossible speed, was surging from the derailed cars. The apocalypse hadn't started with a bang. It had started with a commute. And I had just made it out of the kill zone. The street above the station was pure chaos. I saw 3 cars bumper to bumper, where one was clearly trying to execute an impossible U-turn. Smoke was curling up from a nearby alley, and the air was thick with ash and the sickly sweet smell of burning plastic. That I ran straight down the block, my laptop bag bouncing uselessly against my hip. I was still wearing my office clothes. A button-down shirt, dress shoes that were going to kill my feet, and slacks. I looked like lunch. I rounded a corner, intending to head toward the main highway, and that's where I hit the real problem. Not a horde, but a small, deadly hunting party. 3 of them. A delivery guy in a stained apron, a postal worker, and a teenager with headphones still draped around his neck. They weren't shuffling in classic movie style. They were moving with that jerky, unnatural speed I'd seen on the train, their arms locked straight, their feet stuttering in quick, awkward steps. They were drawn by the noise and the scent of the living. They spotted me. The delivery guy let out a rasping, choking cry, that wet, gurgling sound, and they lurched toward me. I dropped my laptop bag. My defense was a pathetic, half-raised hand. My brain, starved for oxygen and logic, froze. The postal worker was fastest. She slipped on a patch of spilled trash, and that moment of delay saved me. I spun, looking for a way out, and saw only a dead-end alley cluttered with industrial-sized dumpsters. I scrambled up the nearest dumpster, my dress shoes slipping on the greasy metal. Pulling myself onto the lid just as the delivery man slammed against the side. The metal groaned, and the sheer impact nearly knocked me off. I was trapped, perched precariously on a dumpster, with 3 snapping, milky-eyed horrors below. They weren't climbing, but they were certainly trying, clawing at the metal, making that awful, sucking, gurgling sound as their jaws worked uselessly. That I looked around frantically for a weapon. Nothing. A broken broom handle. Too far. Then, a sound cut through the chaos. Not a scream, but a sharp, precise thwack. That I looked across the alley entrance. Standing there, leaning against a graffiti-covered brick wall, was a woman. She looked utterly detached from the panic around us. She wore cargo pants, thick boots, and a heavy, dark canvas jacket. Her hair was pulled back tight, and she had an expression of intense, almost bored concentration. In her hands, she held a long, beautifully crafted aluminum baseball bat. She had just used it. The teenager was now on the ground, his skull crushed with a frightening lack of effort. She looked at me, perched on the dumpster, and shook her head, a flicker of exasperation crossing her face. Seriously? The dumpster? That's your high ground? She yelled, her voice low and steady. You're too slow. They'll swarm that in 30 seconds. She took a slow, purposeful step forward, the bat held loosely, but ready. She was already mentally calculating the angles. The remaining 2 infected turned their attention to her, drawn by her sound and movement. The postal worker lunged. The woman, Kai, moved with incredible minimal efficiency. She sidestepped the lunge, let the postal worker stumble past, and swung the bat backhand. The thwack was sickeningly clean. The postal worker dropped. The delivery guy, driven by sheer, mindless instinct, charged her next. Kai didn't bother dodging this time. She waited until the last possible second, then jammed the end of the bat straight up and into the soft tissue under its jaw. It was a perfect, disabling blow that severed the spinal column. The infected fell, motionless. 3 kills in under 10 seconds. Done. She looked back at me, still shaking on the dumpster. Get down, suit guy. You coming with me? Or are you waiting for the next train? I slid down the dumpster, landing heavily on my stiff knees, my legs burning. Who are you? I managed, breathless. A survivor, and you just watched the only 3 rules of this new world, she said, slinging the bat over her shoulder like it weighed nothing. 1. Conserve energy. 2. Aim for the central nervous system. 3. Never, ever panic. You just broke all 3. Let's fix that. She tossed me a heavy, black, rubberized object. It was a short, thick crowbar, a tool for demolition, not defense. Grab that. We're moving. The military will be dropping fire on the main bridges in an hour to contain the spread. We need to be on the other side of the river before the air patrol starts sterilizing the area. Sterilizing? I repeated, the word chilling me to the core. She nodded grimly, already walking briskly toward the end of the alley. It's worse than you think, suit guy. That fast infection rate, the immediate paralysis in the lower limbs and the hyperaggression. This isn't a rabies variant. This is engineered, and that means someone knows how to shut it off. Or, more likely, is trying to hide the evidence. She looked back at me, over her shoulder, her eyes hard. If we stay here, we burn with the evidence. Come on. I looked at the crowbar in my hand. It was heavy, comforting. For the first time, I felt something other than terror. The primal urge to keep moving. I shoved the crowbar into my waistband and followed her into the burning city. The sound of the infected gurgling in the distance. The rules of my life had just been violently rewritten. We moved through side streets, dodging the debris of abandoned cars and the occasional, twitching figures drawn by the sporadic noise. Kai was a machine. When we had to confront one, she'd wait until I froze, sigh loudly, and then dispatch it with a quick, brutal strike to the base of the skull, never wasting energy or a swing. Listen, she hissed, pulling me back behind a broken newspaper kiosk as a dozen figures shuffled past. The military isn't trying to contain a disease. They're trying to contain an error. The virus, the thing causing the aggression and CNS shutdown, it has a latency period of about 60 minutes, but the hyperaggression kicks in instantly. The paralyzed legs? That's deliberate. Keeps them from running far from the epicenter. Wait, you know this? How? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was on the team, she admitted, her eyes scanning the rooftops. Bioweapons research, Project Chimera. We were supposed to be building a targeted kinetic immobilizer. Something went wrong, catastrophically wrong. And now, the protocol is simple. Burn everything and everyone within the contamination zone. We have 10 minutes to cross the bridge. We sprinted the last 2 blocks toward the river, which was spanned by an old, rusted rail bridge. It was partially raised, but the catwalk on the side, used for maintenance, was still horizontal. As we reached the approach, the sky turned a terrible, urgent shade of orange. Not from the setting sun, but from what looked like a massive, contained napalm strike miles upriver. The sterilization had begun. A deafening roar followed, and a huge plume of black smoke climbed into the sky. Run! Kai yelled. We scrambled onto the narrow, slippery metal catwalk. The air vibrated with the distant, thudding sound of continuous explosions. Below us, the cold, dark river rushed by. We were halfway across when the first military helicopter screamed overhead, not paying attention to us, but dropping high explosive ordnance onto the landside anchor of the bridge itself. The shockwave hit us like a physical punch, throwing me against the cold railing. They're trying to collapse it, I screamed, clutching the bar. They can't, Kai shouted back, pulling me forward. The structural beams are too thick. They just want to create a fire break. We made it to the other side just as the heat from the fires made the air shimmer. The entire skyline of the city looked like a vision of hell. We jumped off the catwalk onto a rocky embankment on the safe side of the river. We had escaped the primary contamination zone, but we were exposed. We need cover, Kai gasped, clutching her side. She spotted it immediately. A decommissioned, 3-story ferryboat, permanently moored to a small, forgotten pier about 100 yards downriver. It was elevated, surrounded by water, and defensible that we broke the lock on the gangplank, pulled it up behind us with my crowbar, and stepped onto the damp, steel deck of the old ferry. We found a small, reinforced storage room below deck and collapsed, safe for now, listening to the echoing thunder of the city being consumed by flames. After a few minutes of ragged breathing, I looked at Kai, who was already running a field dressing over a scrape on her forearm. "We made it," I whispered, the relief making me dizzy. "We're safe." Kai nodded, her eyes closed, breathing deeply. "Temporary. We're safe from the immediate threat, but the military will sweep this area next, looking for uninfected personnel to interrogate." She opened her eyes, and there was finally a hint of hope in them, the purpose she had mentioned earlier. "But I lied to you, Sukai," she said, pulling a small, encrypted keycard from a hidden pocket in her jacket. "I wasn't on the containment team. I was on the development team. I know exactly how this virus works, how it's coded, and I know where the company kept the source code for the neutralization agent, the final stage enzyme." She held up the card. "They didn't just want to hide the evidence of the outbreak. They want to hide the fact that the cure already exists. We're not running away anymore. We survived the end of the world just to be the people who have to restart it." I looked at the chaos outside, the pillar of smoke and the echoing thunder of the world burning, then down at the keycard in her hand. My crowbar felt heavy, but no longer useless. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time since I stepped off that subway train, I wasn't just surviving. I had a mission, and in a zombie apocalypse, a mission is a happy ending. "Okay, Kai," I said, finally feeling the adrenaline drain away, replaced by cold, hard resolve. "What's the first step?" She smiled, a tiny, genuine smile that cracked the stone facade of her survivalist mask. "The first step is sleep. The second step is figuring out how to get to the West Coast without hitting a single major population center. And the third step is coffee. You got anything that brews? The world was ruined, but we were alive, we were armed, and we had the key to unruin it. That's all the happy ending anyone could ask for."